Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Price of Football podcast, the podcast that follows the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, is currently self-distancing from football finance expert Kieran Maguire over there. Although, to be fair, Kieran, considering the respective clubs we support, we've done a little bit of that.
We have indeed.
Yeah, and we were doing it in the Premier League, so I'll be really cross if that ends, when you've deliberately self-distanced yourself downwards away from Palace, but there you go. Now, our producer, hello guy, has decided he wants in on this whole disaster capitalism thing. He sees some money in it. So this show is about the coronavirus and the financial implications for football. Now, some of you may think this is not the biggest priority at a time of crisis, but, you know, it's like the arts, it will have potentially a huge knock-on effect for many people. And I think a genuine impact on the physical and mental well-being of football fans all over the country, so it's worth talking about. So, Kieran, before, let's face it, you know, mine is kind of mindless pub opinion, yours is pretty much fact-based. So before we get into that dynamic, let's just recap where we are at the moment. It's Sunday the 15th of March. It's just gone 1:15. We're in South London, which is good, except for the fact I should be in Prague. Literally 35 minutes after I collected my money, the travel ban was lifted. And then the very next day, I lost 70 quid on the deal, even though I've been with NatWest for all those years.
That is disaster capitalism.
It is proper disaster capitalism. It's NatWest, the lovely friendly man on the phones. We've got a personal account because I'm such a walking disaster area. It's best. my accountant says, have a personal account, pay the extra money. So I've had a really good relationship with my bank manager. He said, no, of course, special rate, blah, 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 which didn't apply when they brought the money back off me. It's terrible, isn't it? So it's 15th of March. So the Premier League and the EFL suspended until the 3rd of April, although I think we all think that will be extended. Non-league football still going ahead because obviously 5,000 people can still go and see Notts County, but 2,000 people can't go and see Macclesfield. So there's all the logic in the world there. The Scottish leagues are suspended indefinitely. Most European leagues have stopped and look like they will stay stopped. Champions League and the Europa League are on hold. UEFA are meeting on Tuesday to discuss the future of those and the Euros as well. Domestic matters first, Kieran, and I know you had a remarkably busy day on Friday because you stood me up.
I'm very sorry about that.
Just to put the icing on a really bad day, instead of going to Prague, my wife said, come to Eastbourne and see my play, and which you were going to.
I'd bought tickets.
I know you had. So I was, instead of being in Prague with 16 old mates, I was going to be in Eastbourne with you and the Baroness, which would have been lovely. But then you blew me out because you were so busy media-wise. Now, one thing I would like to clear up, Kieran, before we get on to the financial issues. I'm still not entirely sure of the reasons why the PL and the EFL made what basically a decision that came out of nowhere, essentially. So I think we all assumed they'd wait for government advice, but they still haven't elaborated on whether this is because they want to help stop the spread, whether it's because of reducing pressure on the emergency services, or whether they're concerned about the safety and well-being of their own players and assets.
I think there's an element of all three of those. If you remember, Mikel Arteta, he was diagnosed with the coronavirus, so that immediately meant that the Brighton versus Arsenal match was off. Then Callum Hudson-Odoi, he was diagnosed with the condition, and there were reports of players self-isolating from other clubs in the Premier League as well.
Yeah, Arthur Boruch is one at Bournemouth, I think. Yeah.
Yep. And I think under those circumstances, we could have been left with a situation where players were showing early symptoms of the disease, but they would have been undiagnosed at that point in time. So therefore, the integrity of the matches taking place over this weekend would have been called into question, because clearly that would have had an impact upon their physical well-being in terms of their ability to perform for matches this weekend. As a consequence, I think the Premier League made a holding decision, but they made the right decision. I think they would also have been concerned about the welfare of their staff. If you've got 50, 60, 70,000 people turning up to a match in a confined space, if you are a steward, you have no choice but to get up close and personal to some people, especially when they're acting like clowns. And therefore, I've got to give the Premier League some credit here. They did the right thing for the right reasons.
It's strange though. I tend to agree with you. I still thought it was, I'd say, hasty. I assumed that they would wait for government advice, just as a way of mitigating legal problems down the line. But I know people who were at Cheltenham races on Friday for the Gold Cup, having a good time, surrounded by 75,000 people in a bigger environment, and yet couldn't go to a football game on Saturday. That dichotomy seemed a bit odd.
It's a constantly evolving scenario. That the government advice on Thursday turned into different advice on Friday, and I think by the time we get a few days into this week, all large public events are likely to be cancelled. The Premier League took the initiative, as did the EFL and the SPFL, in terms of making that decision, just because that they don't want to be responsible. As Jurgen Klopp, who I think has actually become a de facto president of the country with some of the comments he said, if cancelling a football match means that one less person dies as a result of this, then that is the right decision to make.
Let's get on to the cost of this to clubs at all levels. I know Shrewsbury's chairman was very anxious on Friday. He reckoned 3 missing games would be enough to tip the finances of a lot of clubs in Leagues 1 and 2. Lee Burrows on Twitter is just one of many people who's asked whether we can expect the EFL and the PL to help clubs with cash flow problems. Now, you assume the Premier League would be slightly more insulated than clubs in League 1 or 2?
Yes, I've taken a look at the finances of all 92 clubs.
Every cloud has a silver lining, isn't it?
For me,
for you, Kieran?
Spreadsheet heaven, as you can imagine.
An unexpected chance for you. Everybody else is thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen to Granny? And you're thinking, wow, I can look at all 92 league clubs from a different angle.
So
91 league clubs, I beg your pardon.
True.
Sorry, Bury fans.
And also, I think we now know what it's like to be a Bury fan, because we're thinking, well, when's my club next going to play a football game, if at all? And that feeling of loss, which is genuine, I think is now more universal. And those people who had no sympathy for Bury are probably now thinking twice as to, well, if one goes, who cares?
Well, this is interesting. Again, I think we'll get sidetracked quite a lot on this pod. But again, that's one of the reasons I'm surprised they made this decision so quickly, because knowing football fans as we do, the goodwill will wear off quite quickly. I thought they'd take another couple of weeks, and then people might go, okay, we're fine, the season's over. It's a long time to ask people to go without football. It's a long time to ask the broadcasters to not show any football. And I suspect people will be getting impatient. I don't know how that impatience will manifest itself, but I suspect the impatience will manifest itself quite quickly.
Yes, I think we've already seen a reaction in respect of the lack of live TV this weekend and what it's being replaced with. Sponsors, broadcasters, and fans. We're all committed to the game in various forms, and it's going to be a long period without the game. And how we're going to cope is going to prove, I think, something to do with how good we are as a nation.
Well, so far, not very, basically. My new favourite swear word is stockpiler. I'm going to be calling, if I'm annoyed by anybody in future, I'll be calling them a stockpiler, because it's not that sort of pod.
Yeah.
Well, again, as somebody asked me yesterday, quite a few of my friends, I was still in Eastbourne, living the dream, but quite a few of the people that were going to Prague, we went to Dulwich Hamlet instead. It was quite a big crowd at Dulwich Hamlet. What happens if National League teams start getting 1,000 more people a week? Do they then have to stop the National League? Because in one sense, there are National League fans going, well, this could work out for us in terms of our income. But then if too many people are replacing League 1, League 2 Championship football by going to Dulwich Hamlet or Halifax, then they'll end up getting closed.
I think the National League's in a slightly different position financially because it gets effectively zero broadcast income and the sponsorship money is tiny. So therefore it is very, very reliant upon match day. It was a silver lining for those clouds yesterday, but I was looking at the website of Chesterfield, who have dropped down clearly from a couple of seasons ago from the EFL, and they came out with a very strong statement that they felt it was inappropriate to be playing matches this weekend because of they have a duty of care to their employees who could, as a result of the match yesterday, could have been exposed to the virus.
Interesting. Right, let's get back to the cost of clubs then. I think we'll leave the Premier League till last in this because it's other clubs like Shrewsbury. Have you identified any clubs that are more at risk than others, or is this an across the board general risk for all clubs?
In terms of the EFL, yes, certainly the clubs in League One and League Two, they are living from match to match. They get, if you're looking at sort of the clubs which are getting the crowds of 2, 3, 4,000, they're probably getting 50 grand a match from a home fixture, and they've got bills to pay. So what have we seen recently? Well, Macclesfield Town failed to pay their wages in February. Southend United failed to pay their wages in February. Both are now up before the EFL on charges. But if they couldn't pay the wages when money was coming in through the gate, then clearly they're not going to be in a position to be able to pay the wages and other suppliers in March, April, May, and so on. They are not alone. If you talk to club owners, remember that 2/3 of clubs in the EFL are losing money anyway. And that's on the basis of selling tickets. But it's not just the ticket money that these clubs are generating. It's the fact that they are selling catering, they are selling programmes and things of that nature. And when the club is not playing the home games, then it's trying to hire out, if at all possible, the club's facilities to hospitalities, for weddings, for things of this nature, and all of that's going to stop. Either people are going to cancel the bookings, or the club's probably going to have to turn around to them and say, under either government edict or the advice we've had from the EFL, we're not in a position to be able to offer you those hospitality or catering services. It could be that our staff are at risk, or they've already contracted corona, and therefore everybody's effectively on a self-isolating lockdown.
Or you could take sensible precautions and make sure you're clean and hygienic, and if you haven't got symptoms, go to work as normal and keep it apart from each other and try and carry on life as much as possible.
Yes, I think all employers will be taking that stake. The problem is if you are an organisation such as a football club, it could be that you have taken those precautions, but then you've got 50 or 60 people turning up, one of whom might be feeling not 100%, but they feel that they ought to attend, and very, very quickly, I think that we are in completely unknown territory as to how close, how quickly this particular virus spreads between people, and until that has been finalised, I think people are taking a very cautious approach. I work at university. Yeah. We got an email yesterday. No more teaching face to face. We don't think exams are going to be taking place in a traditional method. So we've got to work out alternative forms of assessment, and that's a precautionary approach. In France, all theatres, all cafes, and huge swathes of the economy, which contribute far more significantly than the football industry, are going to be significantly disturbed financially.
You say there are a lot of unknowns. You haven't spoken to blokes in pubs. They don't seem to be many unknowns amongst the blokes in pubs I know. Back to Lee Burrows' question then, talking about whether the EFL will help with cash flow. It strikes me from what you said about Southend, Macclesfield, for example, that the EFL would be reluctant to give them the same help that they would for other clubs. And if you've got clubs that are financially struggling because of their own mismanagement, incompetence, bad luck, whatever it is, it'd be difficult for the EFL to say, right, you can have the same level of help as everybody else, would it? Or will it have to be a blanket solution, if there is such a thing in this case?
I think we've got to look at who is in a physical position to offer help. Looking at the EFL's balance sheet, financial help, yes. The EFL simply doesn't have the cash to do so. So let's just let's just park that idea.
Oh, okay.
Then I think we need to look at all of the football authorities and all of the major players. The EFL doesn't have the money. The Football Association, in their last set of accounts, they had over £40 million. Now,
We've spoken about that on previous pods as well, because there's some confusion about that.
Yes, but it does have significant amounts of cash. What realistically are we looking at? If you're a League One or League Two club, you've got 6 home games remaining. Let's say that they need, on average, 50 grand each to pay outstanding costs.
Yeah.
So,
which would include wages, presumably.
Which include wages.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's 300 grand per club. You multiply that by the 47 clubs. We're talking around about £15 million. EFL doesn't have it. So they're not in a position to do so. Where else could we look? Well, the FA does have money. The FA will say, well, our responsibilities are towards the England team and grassroots football. The FA is now looking at significant losses if Euro 2020 doesn't take place, because in theory, everybody's going to get a refund, and there's going to be issues in terms of the relationship the FA has with the European broadcasters for Euro 2020 games. So I think the FA is in a relatively precarious position.
Do you think? Sorry to interrupt you there, but it might not be in a place to crowbar this in later on. But do you think they might be helped by the fact that the Japanese authorities have said the Olympics will go ahead, come what may?
Well, I think the Japanese authorities are saying that today. Will they be saying that in a week's time?
Right.
At present, the Euro 2020s is on. The nature of the tournament, that it's being spread over 8 cities across Europe, I think it will be madness on the basis of if the disease is going to peak in 10 to 14 weeks here in the UK, that rules it out. Remember, there's a significant number of group games taking place in London, Glasgow and Dublin, and then we've got both semi-finals and the final taking place at Wembley as well. So I can't see it happening.
Well, again, this is a problem, and it's another segue, because you say it's going to peak in 10 weeks. Other people are equally convinced it's going to peak in the middle of April. And in the absence of any explanation from our government or our government side, that's the one thing that we're not getting, is our government say, well, this is why we're not closing schools, this is why we will be closing theatres. So it's very difficult for the FA to act when they have the same scientific facts that we do, i.e. virtually none.
Well, yeah, we're living in a vacuum, and the trouble is, in modern society, we've got the internet, and the internet fills that vacuum with incredible nonsense. I mean, that 10 to 14 week figure came from listening to chief medical officers yesterday, but that clearly could change on a daily basis. So we've established that I think the FA would struggle. The EFL is not in a position. Some clubs will have some form of insurance in respect of this. That's
the probably the most asked question after the cash flow one.
Right.
Is how insurance works with this. Will insurance companies pay out?
Well, if the club has specific insurance for events of this nature, then that there will be paid out.
Are there specific insurance for it?
There are. Well, not global pandemic, but emergency type, unexplained events insurance does take place.
Well, obviously that's what insurance is for. But there are, again, this is a phrase I hadn't heard until coronavirus, force majeure, which I'm hearing a lot in my industry, because TV shows are being cancelled, tours are being cancelled. It seems to me they've got a perfectly reasonable get-out clause if they're going to claim more precautions could have been made to prevent this.
Yes, and clearly the insurance companies and the football clubs and their advisors, everybody's going to be looking at the small print. Force majeure is unexplained event which prevents a contract being fulfilled. I was looking at an article from... I would say the country's leading sports lawyer, a guy called Nick DeMarco. He published something on Friday, and that seemed to suggest there is as more questions than answers with regards to this, and it's going to vary from insurance policy to case by case. My concern is, however, those clubs that probably need the financial support the most are the ones who are least likely to be able to afford an insurance policy in the first place, and they'll have probably taken the view we don't have the money to do it. Keep your fingers crossed.
Well, also presumably most clubs you'd be looking at a one-off postponement. You're looking at a lorry crashing into the stadium, or you're not looking. Most people, you wouldn't foresee this, would they? Football clubs, you'd be hard-pressed to criticise a club administrator for not foreseeing a global pandemic and insuring against it, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
And so the one league we haven't mentioned so far, and this is the Premier League.
Right. So the Premier League. In the Premier League's balance sheet, in the most recent set of accounts, which was June or July 2019, it had over £1.5 billion of cash. So your first reaction is, well, the Premier League's rich, therefore, could it lend a helping hand to smaller clubs? That £1.5 million, I suspect, has been now distributed to the Premier League clubs to fund their wage bill, to fund their transfer markets and things of that nature. So whether it has very much cash at present, I'm uncertain. Again, you then look to the individual clubs in the Premier League, and what we're seeing is very much a mixed bag. Together, the Premier League, again, based on their most recent accounts, had over £1 billion of cash, but that was at the end of June, and that's going to be because people pay their season tickets in advance. Sky pay their money in advance. The sponsors, they put down big deposits because what they want to be able to say to the clubs, you're about to go into the transfer market, here's some cash to go and play with. So do individual clubs have money to do that? I'm uncertain. It was noticeable, however, that if you take a look at Manchester United, as you may be aware, their shares are quoted in New York, and their share price has absolutely tanked over the course of the week. And United,
Purely because of
Corona,
right,
yeah,
okay.
because on the pitch they're on an upturn, and the market normally would say, well, now you've got 2 or 3 times the chance of qualifying for the Champions League, so therefore we'd normally factor that in from a positive perspective. But they've taken an absolute hammering this week because they're in the entertainment industry, and clearly that's one of the industries which is going to look the most vulnerable on sort of for the rest of this year.
Thanks for that, Kieran.
Sorry about that.
I don't. The last thing I want to do is to be, for want of a better word, tabloid about this, because one of the very many things about this whole thing that when Sky or the tabloids, cases don't rise, they soar. Everything is exaggerated, everything's hyperbole, everything's designed to scare already scared people, as far as I'm concerned. But there will be Bury fans going, well, hang on a second, if the EFL do bail clubs out, if the Premier League do bail clubs out, A, why couldn't they do that for us? But B, is your instinct that if this does last, if the season is voided, we'll come on to what could happen, is your instinct that other clubs may join Bury because of it?
Unless they are given some form of financial support, clubs will go out of business. So this is where I think the Premier League, even if it gave, say, 300 grand to each of the League One and League Two clubs as it's an interest-free loan, or say, well, you can repay us over 5 years. We were talking in a recent podcast about the clubs being able to give Richard Scudamore a £5 million golden goodbye, and the rationale behind that. Well, I'm saying for 3 times that amount of money, we can preserve the integrity of the pyramid system. It's something which you and I have grown up with. We could be able to quote when we were kids, I'm sure, which clubs were in which divisions and how many matches and so on.
Yeah. And their managers and their kit and their badge.
And that is really important to English football. My concern is that with many elite clubs now being owned by foreign owners who are not familiar with English culture, and this isn't an anti-foreign owner issue. It's simply they've grown up with a different system.
Well, also many club owners like Leicester's, for example, who are foreign but fully understood the nature of English football as well. So some do, some don't.
Some do, some don't. But they might be saying, well, does it really matter if Morecambe or Macclesfield or Southend go bust? But then I think you've got to look to see, think about our respective clubs. Where did Glen Murray come from? Started off at Workington Reds, then Carlisle, then Rochdale, then us, then you, and his career progressed. Harry Kane spent some of his time on loan at Leyton Orient. Jamie Vardy, he was signed from Fleetwood Town.
And played for Halifax, Dele Alli was at MK Dons. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And to throw that away, I think would be bad for individual clubs, bad for individual towns, but actually bad for the Premier League as well.
And I think there are enough PR gurus to explain that to people, hopefully. But it would mean the EFL, we've learnt from this pod, that would mean the EFL relaxing their own rules, though, wouldn't it? Because Everton, Bill Kenwright tried to help Bury out and was blocked from doing so by EFL rules. So the EFL would, and presumably they would happily do so, but that would mean a rule change by the EFL, wouldn't it?
Yes, but remember the EFL ultimately is a members club, and if the members vote for that change, then I can't see an issue. So those are the football authorities that could help. Then we say, well, what about government help in terms of either central or local government? I suspect that many football clubs will be struggling to pay their monthly rates bill. So it's not going to come from local government. We know that individual councils simply don't have the resources to be able to offer people a potential holiday. Now, I have been looking at some of the changes introduced in the budget by the Chancellor on Wednesday, one of which is for small businesses, and I think many EFL clubs might constitute this under the way that they've been defined, to give them some form of assistance in terms of paying their PAYE and NI. You know, the last thing that the government needs, and this extends, of course, to all industries, is for individual companies, individual businesses who are on the absolute cusp of survival or failure to go out of business as a result of tax issues. So I think there's a little bit of help there. Is the government going to help the football industry? No. As a specific industry, because then quite rightly the hotel industry, the restaurant, the arts,
of course.
So it's not going to make football a special case just because we happen to love football.
I happen to love the arts as well, so I would like to think both would be special cases. But you're absolutely right. They could, I'm sure this government has its priorities, and I doubt if they will tell us those. But their priorities will be the people that are most likely to vote for them at the next election. Would be. I don't think our government are necessarily motivated by the same spirit of goodwill that other European governments are. But this is not for that pod. Because, of course, it's not only the impact on football clubs, it's the impact on the local economy as well. It's the impact on the people who print the programmes, it's the impact on the people in the gig economy who are working in catering and steward and so on. So a lot of other people are primed to lose money because of this, aren't they? Now, in my view, as a Palace fan, I would like to think that Palace would take notice of that and would help out those people that were affected. But if it was a business, so there's no legal requirement for them to do so. You'd like to think there was a moral duty, but how will it affect the local economy as a football club?
Well, if you talk to publicans who operate near football grounds, their 20 biggest days of the year is when the local club's at home. It's tough going in that business.
I'll just stop you there by way of an advert. We've thought of that already, because the pub we go to is tiny and empty during the week. So we're going to try and turn up en masse on Saturday anyway, so there was a game. Because, if one terrible knock-on effect of this was that pub went, I would be heartbroken. But that could be replicated all over the country, couldn't it? So
yes, and I saw some Tranmere fans yesterday doing something similar in respect of their football club. Before we come to the issue of refunds, we've got fans
which we will do.
Before we come to that particular issue, ultimately, the most important thing to a football fan is the idea of they want their club to be there in 12 months' time, in 3 years' time, in 10 years' time, so they can take their kids and their grandkids to the match. What some fans are doing, they're saying, my finances are sort of okay at present. I'm going to buy my season ticket now for next season because cash flow is critical. Forget profit, forget revenue. There's a saying in business that revenue is vanity, profit is reality, but cash flow is the most important thing.
That explains your tattoo.
Exactly.
Say that again. So what's vanity? Because obviously I was trying to think of something funny to say at the end of that serious sentence.
Revenue is vanity. Profit is sanity. Cash flow is reality.
Yes. I know all about cash flow. Well, and I'm aware, by the way, people listening to this, that yes, it could be considered irresponsible for a load of people to go to a pub for no reason on Saturday, but if none of us are showing any symptoms,
exactly,
and if we are, we will self-isolate. Otherwise,
support your local businesses in all shapes and forms.
This is something I really want to get across. It's really important that where possible we do support local businesses and the local economy, because all of us staying indoors, except for occasionally venturing out to panic buy toilet roll and jam, isn't going to do any good at all, is it? So I think it's really important that we go to the pub as long as we all feel we're fit and healthy to do so. Now, well, let's talk about the cost to fans then, because as you say, this is the time of year when we would be looking to renew season tickets, but would we also be expecting, were the season to end now? I know you read the small print of season tickets. I haven't done that. First thing I do, get a season ticket, put it in my card, throw everything away. 2 weeks later, I wonder where the fixture list is. Find that. Of course, I don't read the letter. Nobody does. But in terms of refunds, if you're a football fan with 3, 4, 5 games still to come on your season ticket, are you looking to get a proportional refund of that?
You've signed up for a contract for the club to deliver.
It's a no, then, isn't it?
to deliver the matches.
Yeah.
But I think there's a won't pay and there's a can't pay issue here. It could be that the club has a legal obligation to repay you because it's failed to fulfil its side of the deal. It was supposed to provide you with a minimum of X number of football games, and it's failed to do so. But if the club itself has no regular income coming in, then it doesn't have the physical cash. It goes back to this issue of cash flow. The last thing that football clubs need at a time when they can't pay their staff, a time when they can't pay their regular suppliers, is for some arsey football fan to turn around and say, well, you've cost me 4 home matches this season where I was going to come along and slag you all off. I now want my money back. If you want to do that, then well, sod you, really. I've got no sympathy for fans under those conditions. You support your club because you love your club through thick and thin. It needs help at present. Yeah, by all means be pissed off that you're not going to get to see all the matches. But the present condition is that matches are being postponed.
I think as well, most football fans, I think, will make allowances for that. I'm genuinely, and I'm basing that on football fans that I know, and I've met a lot of them, and I think most football fans are sensible enough to go, I think the club will, when things are back to normal, the club will find some way of recompensing us. We'll either get 4 games free or whatever. And I think clubs will want to do that along the line anyway. But the trouble is, especially at the higher level, is that so many season tickets are corporate season tickets now. So if you've got, at the Emirates or the Etihad, blocks of tickets that are owned by accountants, lawyers, they probably are going to be arsy about it, aren't they, and want refunds?
Yes, I think that certainly the corporate sector, the prawn sandwich brigade, however you want to refer to them, they will take a more forensic approach to this. They will say, well, you've simply breached your contract and we will take action. That could also be the case in terms of sponsors. Although I do think that, to a certain degree, is a double-edged sword, because if the sponsor does take legal action against the club, I think the backlash in terms of goodwill against that sponsor, if you destroyed my football club, well, all football fans are going to say, we ain't buying your products.
Yeah. The Prawn Cocktail Brigade reminds me that there's one question I didn't ask you, which I should have done off the back of talking about EFL clubs and your fears that some of them will go bust. I'm presuming that no Premier League club is at risk from anything other than a much, much longer postponement. Would I be right? Am I optimistic in thinking that they're more immune?
I think they are okay in the short term. One of the things we have discovered over the past few months is that this gold at the end of the rainbow doesn't actually exist in the Premier League. Total losses, I estimate to be around about £300 million. Southampton announced their results last week. They lost 35 million quid in a year. Now, unless you've got owners, and most Premier League clubs do have owners who are in a position to cover those losses, I think we underestimate just how significant this discretionary money can be. Spurs get 800 grand a month. 800 grand a match from catering, for example. It only takes 3 or 4 of those to go missing, and you've got a problem. I think one of the things which might save the Premier League clubs to a certain extent is that almost every club, in terms of its wage structure, heavily incentivises players' wages. So therefore they get appearance bonuses, they get clean sheet bonuses, goal bonuses. At the end of the season, they get bonuses based on the position of the table. Well, those bonuses can't be paid out. So therefore, players are dropping back onto a basic wage. Now, not a basic wage as we understand it, but so that will help the Premier League clubs. I think they're in a better position. We are seeing, going back to your question earlier, in respect of, well, what about the support staff, the people who are on the gig economy contracts? Do the Premier Leagues have an obligation to pay them? No, they don't. And I'm not saying this is because it's from my club. Brighton on Friday said, we will pay all of our match day staff their money, regardless of whether the other matches take place or not, because it's the right thing to do. I'm hoping that other clubs will follow that course of action, and that will again help to be part of goodwill. Manchester United, who were criticised earlier, they gave £350 to everybody that had bought a ticket for their match in Austria that was called off on Thursday. They didn't have to do that. They did it because it's the right thing to do. I think this is an opportunity for the football industry, especially the Premier League, which comes in for a lot of stick, to say, actually, we're not the pantomime villains that you think we are. We saw Aston Villa and Newcastle and some other clubs yesterday. All the food that was allocated, that went to the local homeless shelters and things of this nature. Let's show that actually football is a shining example of what's good in this society.
Well, I've said this before, but any of us who are involved in foundations at football clubs are aware of some of the surprisingly joined-up thinking that does go on in the Premier League and the EFL when it comes to community issues. And again, there's another fear that most of the foundations are self-financing. But again, the longer this goes on, the more difficult it's going to be for those. But the Premier League does do some wonderful community work, and I think you're right. This isn't, if anything good can come out of this, it will be a way of highlighting that.
Yes,
and actually saying, well, as you say, look, we made these decisions early for the good of people. We think we're aware of the economic impacts. We will do our best to mitigate it, and then we'll keep looking at it. But let's have a look at the options for the season. I know this chap, Mr. Cadbury's Parrot, and such a serious pod, I'm almost reluctant to ask Mr. Cadbury's Parrot's question, but it's a good question. My opinion, for what it's worth, and again, this is a classic pub opinion, prefaced by words that I can't stand. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a broadcaster, but it's not going to.
You are a broadcaster.
Oh yeah, I am. Oh yeah, I hadn't thought that. I am. I'm not a scientist. Maybe I'm a scientist as well. I'm fairly convinced that of all the options that are discussed, I think the season will finish, but behind closed doors. I think the broadcasters have got an enormous amount of influence in this. I think they will want to show something, and I think in terms of preventing legal action, which avoiding the season now and saying Liverpool don't win the title, nobody comes up, nobody goes down. As a friend of mine who's a football lawyer said, that's 10 years worth of legal problems there. Ending the season now and saying, right, the three clubs in the bottom three are going down, come what may, again, 10 years. So I think the behind the closed doors one is the least worst. But Mr. Cadbury's Parrot question is, are there anything in league rules that cover something as dramatic as this?
No, there aren't. I think.
Why would there be, presumably?
Let's consider all the options. Option A is that we do resume football in 3 weeks' time, and the matches take place in front of crowds,
which is still an option at the moment.
It is still an option
until Thursday, when the meeting of the Premier League takes place.
That would be best in terms of clubs' cash flow. That will be best in terms of the physical and mental well-being that football brings to communities, which I think is underplayed,
and to millions of people who watch it as well. Not just the local community, but yes.
So that's option number one. I think that's unlikely. Option number two, again, the matches are played, this time behind closed doors. It would be surreal. I think that would be the best option in terms of mitigating potential legal action, because then in terms of sporting integrity, the Premier League is based on 38 games and the EFL games are based on 46. Whether that is feasible, I think it's because you will still need staff. You will still need stewards. You will still need people still need the ball boys. You'll still need the management staff.
But easier to do the social distancing thing and more manageable numbers, etc.
That's right.
Less pressure on emergency services, and for me that seems the only logical conclusion. But we've seen in the past from the EFL and the Premier League that logic.
Well, but I think that's good from a sporting integrity. From a cash flow point of view, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
So, the clubs will be saying, well, we've got costs being incurred in putting on the matches. We're not getting any revenue. Now, could perhaps Sky, who have got a 5-year contract with the EFL, this is a chance for Sky, who come in for a lot of stick, because they're not giving refunds to Sky Sports subscribers. Could Sky say, well, actually, we're going to give you an advance of next year's money if you go and play the games behind closed doors, because that will allow us to broadcast them. It would allow our advertisers to get their products in at halftime. People are still going to watch the matches. And it could be that there's a way of rewarding season ticket holders or people who have bought tickets, because all clubs have databases these days. The EFL have something called iFollow, which does allow people to pick up individual matches. And what the EFL could therefore say is that everybody who's a season ticket, they can watch their club's home games on this thing called iFollow. The Premier League have the facilities to do something very, very similar to that. So, I'm not going to the match. I'm not buying the pie. I'm not buying the programme. The clubs will be getting less money, but they are getting some benefits as well.
From the broadcaster's point of view, I'd imagine the figures would be twice as high again as normal for the circumstances. So advertising revenue would probably increase greatly, I would have thought.
Well, potentially, because let's face it, we're not going outside of our houses to do other things. So, actually, it would give an opportunity for people to watch the matches at home who had perhaps been thinking of doing other things. So, there could be a paradoxical benefit to advertisers from this. They won't be up in their rates. I'm pretty much sure of that. So those are two options.
So, what are the non-football options then?
Well, the non-football options are that we suspend the season as is today, and promotion and relegation are based on what we've seen. From a sporting integrity point of view, it's a non-starter. People will point out to me as a Brighton fan, our next 4 home games: Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City. Are you going to lose all 4 of those?
Well, Karen Brady is the one who's very vocal about this as the solution. But to quote a different case, she would say that, wouldn't she?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't think that would. I don't think that one would stand up. I think there would be litigation from Bournemouth, Villa, and so on. Yeah. Is there some...
presumably the 2 clubs from the Championship that are not getting promoted, so Leeds and West Brom,
Yeah,
unless you do promote them and have a bigger league.
Well, I think that's something which has been mooted over the last 24 to 48 hours. And effectively what you do is that you retain all 20 clubs in the Premier League at present, and then Leeds and West Bromwich Albion are added to those 2. So next season we have a 22-team Premier League, and what will happen is that there'll be 4 teams relegated, and the top 2 from the Championship would get promoted. It's upsetting for those people in a playoff place. There's always going to be a loser, whatever decision was been made, but I think that would be that would minimise the legal wranglings in terms of what's available.
Well, it would, because the Premier League would have to agree with that, so it would be a Premier League vote. But I can almost guarantee the one time when 4 teams got relegated, Palace were the 4th team relegated by some considerable distance. So I can almost guarantee that we would be the 4th team relegated next season by some considerable distance. And there are people who say, well, that's not fair legally. So if that does happen, whoever's the 4th team relegated will be absolutely furious, and they'll be looking at legal action. So
they will be, but this decision would have to be made by the Premier. The Premier League is a members' club. Yeah. All decisions require 2/3 of the clubs to vote in favour. Now, if those clubs at towards the bottom of the Premier League, and let's be honest, we both support clubs who are quite common features.
3 weeks ago, I'd have agreed with you. You speak for yourself. Oh yeah, normally, yeah, you're quite right. Talking other seasons, yeah.
If those clubs say, well, hold on, let's vote to retain the Premier League at 22 clubs, what will happen is then you will get the big 6. They will turn around and says, that is not in our best interest because we want an extended Champions League. Yeah. We will offer our resignation from the Premier League, and now you can have your 22 clubs, but they're not going to involve United, Chelsea, Arsenal, City, Liverpool, and so on.
So, which only goes to prove that whatever solution is taken isn't going to be the end of it, is it? There's ramifications for this for seasons ahead.
Yeah, but if there was a simple solution, somebody would have identified it by now, and it would have been made.
Yeah, and what about the option where we don't void it? We stop the season now. We say, right, Liverpool have won the Premier League. The 2 teams are going down, so there'll be a lucky escape for Bournemouth. Presumably, 2 come up. No playoffs. Tough if you're in the top 6.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings, Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Well, who are the two teams at the bottom? You've got Norwich and Villa. If I was the chief executive of Villa, I'd be putting in a legal claim to say, well, we've got 9 games left. We could have picked up 27 points.
Yeah, they've got games in hand as well. 2 games in hand on most teams. Yeah.
So there is no simple solution to all of this.
What about we've had some questions about specifics. Aaron Waite, for example, has asked, how would a delay affect season-long loan deals? So would the season be considered finished now, or would a player that you've got on loan, if we start again in August, how does that work?
I think this is actually an elephant in the room which nobody's really mentioned to date.
Oh, well done, Aaron. Or is that an implied criticism of me, though?
No. I think he's raised a very good point. Most football player contracts expire at the season end of the 30th of June. So they have a contract of employment which expires on the 30th of June.
Actually, I didn't know that. So that's considered the end of the season.
That's
30th
right.
Of June. That's quite a long time after the season's finished, isn't it? In terms of
it is. I mean, you can if a player is being, but you think about when the window starts. The window effectively starts on at the start of June. So that's or. There's a little bit of overlap, but not a lot.
That's something else that's going to be affected. Whatever happens, the transfer window is going to have to go out the window, isn't it, really?
Yes, and I think those clubs that historically have been reliant upon the transfer market as a means of generating cash, they're going to be in a terrible position because nobody's going to go into the market until we know for certain how the virus issue is going to be resolved. So you're not going to go in if you're thinking, well, I was going to get a centre half in July, I would pay up to £50 million. If the season's not going to start until October or November, there's no way that you're going to do it. This is going to have to be a worldwide or at least a UEFA-based decision as to how the windows are going to operate, not just in England, across the whole of Europe. Right. Because it could be that we come out of this relatively quickly, or it could be that Germany come out of the virus situation relatively quickly, but you've still got hotspots in Spain and Italy and so on. So I think that's going to be a massive issue. My concern in respect of the integrity of fixtures, if let's assume that Euro 2020 is going to be cancelled. I think that's a fair assumption. If the season overlaps into July and August, you will have players who are effectively unemployed from the 30th of June. Now, do they go back to their club that they played for last season, or have they managed to get themselves a contract, especially in League One and League Two? You're only on a 1 or 2 year contract. It's a pretty precarious existence in those leagues. Your first commitments towards paying the rent and looking after your family, if you are, let's say that you're Carlisle and you're in the playoffs in League Two, or something of that nature, what happens at the 30th of June? Do you carry on paying for your previous club in July, risk getting injured when you've already been accepted an offer of a contract from Plymouth or somewhere else? So I think we've got to think not just of the clubs, but we're talking about young men who have got their financial futures ahead of them.
A lot of people have asked this. I think partly because you've scared the bejesus out of people about FFP since we started the pod. Chris and Lou on Twitter, two people, said that would a change in the year end impact FFP because the longer season is going to incur extra wage costs? And Lou points out, everyone is going to have higher losses, surely. So surely FFP will have to be given a breather, won't it? Or presumably not for those clubs that are already in trouble, but there's got to be some leeway, surely, isn't there?
I think for the likes of Sheffield Wednesday, Derby, Macclesfield and Southend, who have had financial issues or have had charges levelled against them prior to the rise of the virus here in the UK, I think those cases will continue, although if I was the EFL, they wouldn't be the top of my inbox.
Yeah.
I would expect an emergency general meeting of EFL owners to take place, and at that meeting they will agree to suspend financial fair play considerations for 2019-20 because we are living in exceptional times and these are exceptional circumstances, so therefore you cannot apply the standard rules and then either the rules, there'll be another. It could be that they'll give them another 12 months grace because there will be a recovery time for 2020-21, and we start FFP effectively with a clean sheet in 2021-22.
But again, I haven't got your accountancy brain or legal acumen. That seems to me that in 5 years' time, there's still going to be people with clever lawyers going, well, hang on a second, there's still a knock-on effect from 2 years ago, and how come that club's been affected and we're not affected? So again, whatever decision is made, there's no decision that can be taken that isn't without a ripple effect, is there?
There is, but again, I go back to the fact that both the Premier League and the EFL are members' clubs. Now, if I used to belong to a running club, I therefore had to abide by the rules of the club. If I didn't like them, I just had to go and stop running with that club. It's the same.
What running rules did you have? No walking?
Well, in terms of your conduct, if you are on club nights,
don't read spreadsheets in the shower, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course. It's the more I think about it, the more I think how unlucky Bury would be. If all this was happening this season, Bury would probably still be with us.
Potentially, yes.
I think we could be here talking for 2 or 3 hours about domestic football. We haven't got that length of time. So our sympathies, I'm guessing the sympathies of most people listening to this, are not with the clubs in the Champions League. That's not most of our priority. No. Although, God forbid, you and I have occasionally would have gone to sleep at night. Not tonight, we're not sleeping together tonight. It's social distancing, separate rooms tonight. Occasionally you and I will have dreamt of a trip to Turkey in the Europa League, but we're not in that club yet. So the impact of the cancellation of Champions, Arsenal fans are probably thinking this is a good deal because they're not going to be disastrously down the Swanee like they thought they were. So how will it affect those clubs that are still in the Champions League and Europa League?
Well, if the Europa League and Champions League are suspended, I think UEFA will pay out on the basis of their progress to date. So therefore, they will lose out an element. But we are now sort of in the last 16, last 8 phase of the tournaments. Yes, there is considerable money involved for those clubs, but Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, and so on. I appreciate Liverpool aren't in it, but those clubs are in a far better position to survive. I think clubs in the Europa League, especially from the non-Big Five nations, they are more reliant upon UEFA money than other clubs, and therefore they will be struggling. But they'll be struggling just as equally because I suspect their domestic leagues are not taking place, and they're in the position of every EFL club that we've been discussing throughout the course of this pod.
So do you think then is your instinct that any domestic football fixture pile up, which seems is one of the clearest options, that we do continue the league May, June, July, etc. Is that going to impact on UEFA's third competition in the likelihood being that there simply won't be any spare days in the next 2 seasons to start?
I think that's a huge issue, and we've got another bogeyman in the form of the World Cup 2022, which was already going to disrupt the domestic seasons in Europe for 2021-22 because it's taking place in the winter. Now, could that be rescheduled? I think it could be. That would be one solution. Or do we end up effectively playing one season over 2 years, and then we sort of start afresh? I'm fairly aware that there are meetings and there are calls and there are WhatsApp groups between all of the Premier League chief executives, and those messages are pinging through on an hourly basis as more data becomes available, and as they will have been speaking to government, they will have been speaking to their health advisors. Even if we get a pretty quick recovery from this, players who have been self-isolating, they're not in a position to play football. They are elite athletes. It's not like me or you who can just rock up to a local park and display our silky skills. They actually have to put a bit of effort in beforehand.
I can't do that anymore because I've never been part of a running club. Rule breaker or no rule breaker. I take it you're not part of the running club anymore. You're implying that you infracted the rules of the running club?
Unfortunately, I effectively broke my knee in the Dublin Marathon 3 years ago.
Is that against the rules, is it?
That is against the rules. Okay. I knackered it after 20 miles, and being a bloke, I carried on running. I've had 3 operations since, and it's still not working.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
Sorry.
Let's move on. So rescheduling the Euros for next year, that is going to have a massive impact on the World Cup season as well. Which is do you remember the old days when tournaments used to go ahead and leagues used to carry on as well?
Yes.
I mean, when we were growing up, most clubs didn't supply players to England, so if England were playing, you'd still have a league game. So that's got to be a possibility as well. Although again, the major clubs are at a massive disadvantage if that's the case, because they're 5 players down, aren't they?
I think yes. We got the African Cup of Nations. Will that be impacted because that's now become a winter tournament taking place in January 21? World Cup qualifiers for 22. How are those going to be squeezed in?
Yeah.
I think this is indicative of football was very much at the limit in terms of the number of matches that were taking place. Perhaps it does give clubs and administrators an opportunity to sit back whilst it's in recovery mode and come up with a football calendar which makes more sense. Although the fact that we've got UEFA and FIFA effectively at war in terms of FIFA wanting an expanded World Club Cup competition because they've seen how much money is made from the Champions League. Common sense and those institutions when they're squabbling for rights is something which has been in short supply historically.
We talked about insurance for league games. What about the insurance effect if the Euros are cancelled? Because we know the FA have invested a lot of money. Again, this is something I learnt from you because I assumed that the reason there was games in Kazakhstan was because the UEFA were trying to be nice to the smaller countries, but no, because Kazakhstan could afford to bid for games. So we know the FA have coughed up a lot of money to get games here, as the Irish FA has, the Scottish FA has. Losing that potential income will have an impact on grassroots football. Well, there's exactly the bottom of the period that we've been talking about, but surely they will be insured, won't they? National FAs will have had enough money to pay for insurance at that level, surely?
They certainly will have insurance policies. You would expect those to cover major events such as terrorism, because that is clearly a risk today in the major cities in which these take place. Whether that will cover an incident such as a pandemic, it's all down to the small print, and I can guarantee you that this weekend the insurance companies and the FA will both be going through clause 27.6.I to see whether or not they can wriggle or be forced to pay out.
Because it could cripple the insurance companies as well, couldn't it?
It will be a major hit.
Yeah.
The nature of insurance is that they make money most years, and they effectively have to go and pay out once every few years when there is a major issue. Going back to 9/11, for example, the insurance companies survived.
That's a very good point. Are there specific companies that I've never heard of that insure sports events, or are we talking about your high street insurance companies?
No, the nature of insurance is it is very specialist, and therefore there will be specialist insurers, but also reinsurers, because what will happen is that the insurance companies themselves will take those premiums and they will say, well, actually, if something does happen, if there's a major terrorist incident or there's a major issue, we can't afford to pay out all of that money, and therefore they will have effectively, a bit like some of the betting exchanges, they will have laid off the money they've received with other parties as well.
Yeah, I don't mean this to sound flippant in any way, but the terrorism parallel is quite interesting, because I know quite a few people who are treating this zone as a potential terrorist threat. It's like, I'm going to carry on with my daily business because otherwise the virus is run.
Yeah,
and in a way, I kind of admire that approach to it.
I think that is what is best for the economy.
Yeah.
You work on the basis of I'm going to get it at some point. Minimise risk. So exactly the same thing that we do when we fly. We go through security.
Yes,
we accept that there are restraints on the way that we can behave. So we do exactly the same. And if it could actually be there could be some paradoxical benefits if we as a nation start washing our hands after going to the toilets. Then I don't think that's a bad thing, because that's going to reduce the spread of other diseases.
It was slightly distressing to discover that there were people who weren't doing that anyway.
Well, I subscribe to. Have you ever heard something called Pop Bitch?
I didn't realise Pop Bitch was still going.
Pop Bitch
after being mentioned in it not in a particularly bad way. Just is it still how refreshingly 90s? And you subscribe to it. That's
I subscribe to Pop Bitch.
Viz Pop Bitch.
Absolutely, and this
I have
week
been in Viz.
Oh yes, my hat is doffed.
I see, you're welcome.
If you take a look at this week's Pop Bitch, it actually lists celebrities who wash their hands after going to the toilet, and those who don't, including some very prominent politicians.
How do they know these things?
Well, it's a closet industry. It's a bit like the elves on QI. There's people reporting and snitching all the time.
Yeah, I know some of the elves on QI. They're quite overweight, some of those elves on QI. Like the elves on Only Connect. They're not as elvish as you might think. No offence to elves on QI, but some of them are probably not washing their hands after. I'm not entirely sure we've covered ourselves in glory as a country in the last few days. But football, is it resilient enough, do you think, to... I mean, I don't think football, since the war, when... Of course, football stopped. Well, official football. There were war leagues and all sorts of regional leagues, and football still carried on. Theatres closed for 10 days until they realised that was a mistake morale-wise, and theatres reopened. But I don't think football would ever expect to suffer from anything as long-term as this. Is it resilient enough to survive?
It is resilient enough to survive in the short term, provided some cash assistance is given to those clubs who are most vulnerable. The longer this continues without clubs being able to generate cash, the more my concerns is that what we have at present in form of the presently 91 clubs, that could easily be reduced. Or we have some sort of quasi, semi-professional football taking place in the lower leagues, which would be a shame, because I think we all do love the fact that the likes of Wigan can come from nowhere and get to the Premier League and win the FA Cup, and I think it would make it more difficult if the professional level of football was reduced.
Will there be a way? And I think, because we need to end this now, and it'd be nice to end on a positive note if we can. Football fans will want to help their clubs in any way possible. Do you think there will be clubs looking at some kind of temporary crowdfunding thing, looking at fans helping out? Because fans will want to do that, won't they, if they can? Wealthier fans will want to donate money. Fans who can donate a fiver will want to donate a fiver because they want to be part of this rescue attempt.
That's right. Most football fans are fantastic. I think we get waylaid by the clowns on social media, and the people who go along for football to get drunk and cause a bit of aggro. You've only got to look.
Nothing wrong with the first bit of that. The second bit, which is why I'm going to ride this out more than you, because it's not going to nothing. I'm pickled. You healthy people, you're in trouble.
Bury Football Club, when they were in the Football League, they had a buy a seat campaign 15 years ago. I bought a seat. We've seen that Wimbledon have managed to raise over £5 million for the Wimbledon bond. Norwich City have done similar. I think some form of crowdfunding is feasible. And there could be benefits given to the fans. You're going to get a free. When the matches resume, if you put in over £100, you get a free shirt next season. You get a chance to vote on our next away kits colours. There are ways of giving benefits which aren't necessarily costly financially to the club, to the fans who are prepared to do things of this. Also, there are owners who love their clubs, and if some of them have money, I think they will do the best that they can, because it is a central part of our life. It is the glue which binds us together.
I'm glad you said that, because to come full circle, I love the theatre. Yeah. I love opera. I love ballet. All right. If I could never see another live ballet again, tough, fine. If I could never go to the theatre again, if I could never see another Shakespeare play again, if I could never go to Eastbourne again to see a play about Boris Johnson, already the thought of there being no football is astonishing. Yep. But not just in the game itself, just missing everything around it. And so if anything does come out of it, it's the fact that we've learned how much we love our game and how much we need it at every level.
Yes, it brings solace to the lonely. It brings friendship to people who don't have friendship. I maintain, we've both been following our clubs for probably 50 years or so. Football is a fantastic day out ruined by 90 minutes of activity in the middle. Yeah. But it's that fantastic day out. It's the fact that we've got blokes in their 50s and 60s like us who are talking to people, and we don't talk as, we're not good at communication. Football allows us to do that. Football allows you to hug strangers. When was the last time you hugged a stranger other than at a football match?
Yesterday morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you don't need to know why, but it's fine. He didn't want to be hugged, but it's a theatrical situation. I also, as well, football fans, non-football fans won't understand this, but they won't be listening to it, so it doesn't matter. You can't. It's impossible to explain how much we love the game. But also, we travel the country. We've got empathy. We see what life is like in recession-hit areas. We know what other towns look like. So we're more out of the bubble than other people. We've got. I remember going to a wedding recently and being sat at a table where nobody liked football. I literally had nothing to talk about with these people. It's a nightmare, and I blame them, not me. So I've got all sorts of interests, but they just without football, because that's the first question. Who do you support? 10 minutes later, you're finding things out about this bloke who tells you he supports Stoke, and he says, "Oh yeah, when I was at Stoke," and then he knows the steward. It's brilliant, and like I say, if anything, it just shows you how important it is to us and how we need to fight to keep it going.
That's right. And you hear all of these great things taking place. I think Rotherham were playing an away match a couple of weeks ago, and they went en route. They stopped in Bury to support the publicans in Bury who have lost out in business themselves. Four coaches turned up. Well, what a fantastic idea. I think what we're seeing at present is an opportunity to prove that we, at all parts of football, fans, administrators, owners, players and so on, actually nearly all of us are good people.
Yeah. Here. We do have other podcasts that we have recorded, so they'll be out in the next few days, including a very, very open, refreshing and frank interview with Neil Doncaster, who's the supremo of Scottish football, which we recorded before all this took place. So our schedules is sort of all we will be recording other pods. We will keep returning on a Monday and Thursday.
Yep.
And I suspect we will find things to say, and hopefully before long we'll be finding things to say about football issues rather than coronavirus issues. But until then, we are Adapted Production. If you do have questions for us, it's questions@priceoffootball.com, and we'll see you shortly.
The price of football.
Goodbye, folks. Wash your hands.
The price of football.